I can't believe we're able to speak to the number one requested female speaker on women's health. Like that's pretty impressive.
Oh, thank you. That's that might be a little more generous than necessary, but you know.
No, it's actually directly from some of the quotes expressed here online. So you have some people
Ah,
have said, let me give you a quick rundown of you and who you are. Who knew, in case you don't know, who knew that science and wellness could be so entertaining and engaging? Kim Glass, executive director of eWomen's Network, which is huge, right?
yeah.
A transitional journey in a world where stress has become omnipresent. Understanding its biology and impact on our lives is more crucial than ever. That's where Betty comes in. Her talk on the biology of stress was groundbreaking, providing valuable insights and practical strategies for managing stress effectively. Teresa Tran, Kubra Intentional.
Mhm.
And here's, I mean, if you want to get into a really good one here, just the right message for our event. After COVID, our national team needed just the right speaker to bring the team closer together and feel hopeful. That's huge. Betty Ray's message hit home. She is entertaining and inspirational. Katie Waywood, Hilton, North America. We're not talking about, that's not Motel 6.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is Hilton, North America, which is wild. It just goes. Underwood Speaker Bureau, C200 Women's Conference. What is that? What is a C200 Women's
So
Conference?
C200 was actually started a long time ago by a very small cadre of women who were hopeful that they could eventually see 200 or more women in the C-suite. So decades ago. So it's a much larger organization. They have a mentorship organization now, but it was started by some of the very early sort of pioneers of women in C-suite positions. Back in the early 80s and even the 70s. And so, it's grown since then, but, it should probably be renamed to C 2 million. But, but, back then, it's not that long ago, basically when I was in high school and junior high, it was a lot for a woman to want to hit that glass ceiling and move above it,
I
you
bet.
know?
That's no joke how things have changed, right? I mean, they said
Yeah.
something beautiful, said a life-changing experience. And this seems to be resounding amongst a lot of the commentary of you and who you are. Dr. Betty has an exceptional ability to explain complex scientific concepts in an engaging and easily digestible manner. Her comprehensive understanding of the body, her personal anecdotes, and her genuine care for audience members made for a truly captivating experience. Judy Locke Pierce, C200 Women's Conference.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, wow.
Yeah. That was fairly sweet. I should say thank you to all of them.
Yeah, that's good. We'll send them some flowers, right? That's so good. Yeah, you are. I think, yeah, I want to say I think you're an exceptional woman, I talk to a lot of people and you seem to resonate with me always every time I hear of you or speak of you. I speak very highly. I think that
Thank
speaks for volumes. This is our first reframes where we're meeting with people and entrepreneurs. And I just want to meet with high level entrepreneurs and get a feel for how they become who they are, what they are. This is what I would love to do all the time. This would be
Yeah.
my I would love to do this all day long, actually, because I love talking to people and high
Yeah.
level thinkers and thought leaders. So this is the first one we're doing here with the closed audience, but the next one, as time goes on, I hope to have you on in future months. We'll have people actually in a conference room setup, so they'll just see us speaking and they'll be able to ask questions in the chat, which would be kind of exciting, like a live digital audience.
Yeah, I love live digital. I did a lot of for about 10, 12 years, I did a lot of radio in the morning. If they had a study that came out that was somewhat inflammatory, I had a friend of mine that was in the news world and then kind of came out into the PR world. So whenever they needed to talk about it, they'd be like, "Can you talk about the study?" And so I would take phone calls from all over the country for Fox News broadcasting or whatever. and have to answer questions. But what I found was, you're thinking you're coming on about the study that said smoking is worse than, or cigarette, or eggs are worse than cigarette smoking. And then all of a sudden they start asking questions about themselves. So it's kind of like open karaoke bar mic. You don't know what they're going to ask. And so I got really comfortable just with, hey, how long do I have? What are we talking about? Which I appreciate, because I enjoy that type of environment. I like that kind of off the cuff.
So do I. There's something beautiful of it, I
Yeah.
just have a videographer, and I'm sharing a lot of the back end of what business is and what it looks like. And it's not all pretty. It's not all, glamorous. 90% of it is just chugging through the mud, and
Yeah.
figuring out problems and putting out fires, and that you're never a hero of. You turn around, you're like, all right, what's next? And you walk over to the next task, which is kind of fascinating.
I think that's the entrepreneurial way, though. We just move the goalpost, right? Like, the one thing that we're not very good at is celebrating our achievements and accomplishments, because even as we're moving through that, we just do this with the goalpost. Like, we're literally carrying the football and we grab the goalpost and carry it in front of us because we just move at the same rate. So we never, as a whole, we're not really good at stepping back and going, who am I today compared to who I was 20 years ago? Like, would my 8-year-old self be amazed? Yes. But
Wow.
my person yesterday isn't amazed. I was
Right.
like, I'm good enough today, right? It's messed up what we do, but that's also why we're high achievers, because we move the goalposts. We're never satisfied, right? So it's all of that goes together.
Yeah, what is it? Content but never satisfied, right? That's kind
Right.
of
Yeah, I'm very content, but never satisfied.
where did that come from for you? Like, where did that originate? Like, I'm so intrigued by, yeah, I'm a big believer of amazing women. My mom was an amazing woman. Like, she's the whole reason why I'm here in this country. Came to a country she had no idea the language of. Worked 3 years collecting cans. 3 jobs
Yeah.
around the clock to make enough money to go back and go across the border again. One of the most dangerous things you could do at that time in the 90s, right?
Yeah.
So I have a lot of strength because of her, from her, and she was a great role model for me, or a model of what perseverance looks like. Where does that come from for you? Where did that start originate?
I think a lot of it kind of came out that way. Like, even if you ask my parents, they said you were really, really amicable, like happy baby. Like, I laid on the floor and I was pretty excited until about 18 months. I didn't try and walk or talk. They were kind of like, I don't know what she's doing. And they were like, then you just sort of stood up, grabbed a clipboard and started giving directives, and was like, this is how this is going to go down. Like, so there was definitely this very big independent streak, and also this side of me that was kind of like, well, that's the guidelines, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's always so, because that was always like that. I'm like, why? And if the why wasn't good enough, I'm like, well, can't it be different? And I never, like, no never worked for me. I was just like, well, that might be no for you, but if there's a better way, why don't we figure out a better way? And then I would say the other side of it is, I am a kid of the, I'm a Gen X, and my parents were like, get up and have breakfast, leave the house. When your dad whistles for dinner, you better come home, and then go back outside. And then when the lights come on the street, then you should come home. That was the degree of parenting we had. And so the other part is, I had an extraordinary independent and curiosity streak. And so I was all over the city. I ride my bike everywhere. I'm talking miles away.
Oh, wow.
And, yeah, because I was, but that type of sort of problem solving / independence / figuring out what you're doing, I think that builds a level of resiliency that we don't really let our children have today, because we're terrified something's going to happen to them. I'm like, I rode my bicycle in rush hour traffic. No one seemed to care I was riding. I didn't seem to care. I didn't have a helmet. You know what I mean? But they just didn't do that. But I think that sort of hands-off parenting. I had a dad that was an engineer, and I was a very scientific kid. So he and I did a lot of stuff together. And then my mom was always like, well, I don't think you can do that. And so I was just like, well, okay, well, now you put down the gauntlet, I'm going to have to do it, and so there, I had these like competing ideals. And I think, so what that did was, it allowed me to understand and listen to my own voice. Right.
Wow.
Because I got two different messages. My dad's like, do whatever it is you want to do. You're smart. My mom would be like, no, you need to be a good little girl and sit down and be quiet and be seen, whatever. And I was just like, nah, it's not going to work for me. But I think because I had that, I started trusting my own intuition, right? I started listening to me first. And it's
Mm,
not that I thought a lot of myself, but I was like, everything to me was solvable, right? Like, it's just, that's another problem. And that just means we haven't figured out a new way to do it. And that's kind of how I've lived my life. I've had three distinct, completely different careers, completely
wow.
different education, completely different world, completely everything different. I was just like, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to do this. And I would just do it. Right. And I think it's because I had that weird level of independence and also a lot of rope, because I could just do it.
Yeah, but some people get a lot of rope and they hang themselves, right? So it's interesting that you created something so beautiful, and I did think there's a lot of overly nurturing, demographic of youth, and I feel like kids are now becoming, they're almost raised to be children up until like 20, 30s. Like they don't ever grow up out of into adulthood because they never were kind of taught those tools, which is kind of interesting. So I totally agree with you there. The problem solving, do you think that came from your dad on the engineer side? Is that kind of
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Because I was a kid that would take stuff apart. If there was a toaster, I was like, how does this work? I would take it apart. I was very kind of analytical, kind of scientific like that. And I wanted to know how things worked, right? So I think there was definitely a part of that. Um,
curiosity?
yeah, yeah, I'm frighteningly curious, and probably a kind of abusive sort of way. I'm always like, well, why is that? I think the other thing too is, you mentioned that your mom, had to work, three jobs and do all these things to try and make ends meet. Well, my parents, my dad was an engineer, but you hear that today and you think really wealthy. We weren't, right? And so we were very resourceful, and I didn't get an allowance every week that I could go spend whatever I wanted to spend. So I started washing cars and mowing lawns by the time I was 9. I started
Wow.
babysitting at about 10, 11 years old. By the time I was 14, I was earning a W-2. I'm 56. I've been earning some sort of government W-2 pay for 42 years, longer than my father had when he retired. Right. So,
Wow.
and so I just was like, if I want money, if I want resources, if I want to make things happen, I'm just gonna make it happen. So I was like, I went to the mall one day and I said, I'm gonna go get a job. And my mom's like, no, you're not. And I'm like, I got a bike.
Wow.
And so, yeah, so I think there's that. And
That's awesome.
yeah. But I think, today, like, kids can't get jobs today. Like, how do you teach a kid to have resourcefulness when they can't they can't babysit anymore because everybody wants a college age, 51 background checks, da 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 da. Like, we were 11 taking care of 6-year-olds till 3 o'clock in the morning, and no one seemed to find a problem with that. I mean, I babysat for people on my street that literally would go out until like midnight, 1 o'clock, days on end. I babysat like 3 or 4 nights a week, every week for years, because it was,
Wow.
I was like, I'm just going to do that, right?
Good cash,
And
hang out and watch a movie. Yeah.
yeah, I was just like, hang out, watch a movie, fall asleep on the couch, get up, leave.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, I think we're so worried about our kids like falling down and scraping their knee that we're basically chopping off this developmental thing that needs to happen when you're a kid, which means you need to screw up, you need to fall down, you need to do some stupid stuff, you need to try on things and learn how to like do something on your own without help. And I think we all wanted to be better than our parents were, like more friendly, because my parents weren't always friendly, right? Like, they were
Yeah.
like, you're going to do what we tell you to do. And I think I think we kind of chop them off and take away some of their growth opportunity because of it.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think there's kind of an interesting. I think we're entering a very interesting paradigm where we're the first generation that really understands behavioral science so much.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting to learn. I think there was kind of an overcorrection of the 90s and 2000s of like everyone has to get therapy. There's a diagnosis for everything, and I think now we're entering more behavioral. Understanding that we're just creatures of behavior and what's being patterned and what's being modeled. And I really look forward to the next, if done correctly, the next 20 or 40 years could be amazing. Yeah, I think I connected you with Busy Gold. She's awesome, right?
Mm-hmm.
The gal in Idaho. I did
Yeah.
her program, and I learned that my emotional regulation issues are at times of I could handle things really well up to a certain point, and then anything over that, I thought I was emotionally regulated here. Wasn't. I was just coping. And then this would be a breaking point because I never really learned to emotionally regulate. This is just an area where I could cope in and I could fake it in this. I could wear that mask until
Yeah.
something blew up. And it was actually my mom and my dad, or my mom, my uncle, my grandma over loving me because of the relationships I had with my fathers, right? That were not good.
Yeah.
And by them over loving me and trying to love me to the best of their ability, they created such a bubble around me that they didn't ever teach me the tools to regulate self, which is kind of fascinating. I see a lot of that now. A
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. It's funny. I have a very good friend of mine that was a Marine, right? And so he did a bunch of tours in Afghanistan, and he even had to bring the soldiers home from the war and go notify the parents that their son or daughter died, and do the whole thing at the cemetery. I can't even fathom what that's like. But he was
Yeah.
asking me one day. He's like, "You're always calm," like.
Mhm.
And he's like, when things get even harder, the calmer I get. And that's usually the case. Like the more that starts spinning, the calmer I get. Right. So if the building blows up, I'm probably a good person to have in the building as long as I make it. Right. And he's like, what do you think that is? And I was like, I think I anesthetize myself to stress, like the impact of it, the reactivity of it, over time. And I think a lot of times we don't learn that. I learned that by learning how to manage people early on, because I've been managing people since probably 37 years, so early on I had to learn the hard way because I was just a few years older than the people that worked for me. And it was like, okay, that doesn't work, So
Yeah.
but that learning how to regulate, and be authentic at the same time is not easy.
That's fascinating. What do you remember what your ages 2 to 5 look like? Do you remember that?
We moved around a lot. So we moved from, I was born in Northern California, and then we moved to Omaha, and then we moved to Hawaii, and then we moved from Hawaii to New Jersey. That sucked. I do remember that. And, it's interesting because we lived in a little house in Hawaii. My brother is 4 years older than I am. And so he was out and about a lot. I didn't have as much freedom, obviously, because I was a very little kid. But I had a fair amount of freedom. And, I had one friend that I would talk to at the fence. His name was Mikey. He was always in his whitey tighties. Why is that, Reef? I don't know. He was. And I always thought it was weird because his mom, I'm telling you, I'm serious. Like, I'd want him to come over because I had this little playhouse, and I want him to come play house with me or whatever. And she would never let him. But then she would come out and tell him he had to go to the bathroom. And he'd be like, I don't have to go to the bathroom. She's like, you have to go to the bathroom. And I'm like, it was just weird because I was always like, why am I not allowed to spend time with Mikey? And so I, like, as a little kid, I thought it was something about me. I'm being really honest. Like, that there was something about that, that she, it's probably because she wanted her son to come in and she didn't want to have to pay attention to him. Right. But, I had so much alone time, where I was in the backyard because my mom would be just like, go do something until dinner, Like she did. That was Gen X. I'm telling you, Gen X, they were like, hey, once you're walking, you're fine.
Out the door.
Yeah, I'd go down the street. I'd go hang out with this lady named Monique. I rode my tricycle into a pool one time because it was in the deep end. I was circling the pool, and I just went straight over the side, straight to the bottom. I had a terrible daredevil streak. Like I had no fear of heights, no fear of anything else. I liked those things. I still do.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. So it makes sense that you like that you're okay in chaos. You're good in chaos. Because I was smuggled into the U.S. at 3. A father, drug abusive, threw against walls. My mom cut him off. New father enters picture. Baby brother's born. Moved from South Central Los Angeles to Alhambra, Rosemead. So in that short window of time, I guess it's clinically shown that you take a chemical snapshot of what reality is like, and for survival we call that our homeostasis because that's what we as love or good or whatever. So people that have a lot of moving military background or a chaotic childhood end up having really good or really not really good, a really interesting relationship with chaos where things are burning around fire. Everyone else is DEFCON 5. You're like, hey, we're the marshmallows, do we
it's interesting that you say that because obviously your experience was very chaotic and to some, unsafe, right? There was safe people and then there was unsafe people, right?
Totally.
Like like a lot of people would look at my parents and go, they were not safe. Relatively speaking, all of us were raised that way, right? So I never had a degree of massive unsafety, right? Like the sensation or the feeling of unsafety. I definitely had the degree of no one's paying attention, right? Not necessarily in a bad way, because I was always like, well, if I want to go do that, I'm going to do that, right? If I want to ride my bicycle down the creek for an hour and a half to the other side of the city, I'm going to do that, right? So I think it's those things. Because we decide who we are and how we're going to handle situations based on this like 2 to 8 year old time period.
Yeah,
right?
chemically it becomes that because you don't know unsafety until after you look back at it and you go, oh, that was bad. But in the
Yeah,
moment, you're
your
feeling it.
amygdala wires at that point. So your memory and amygdala are tied together. Here's what's
Yeah.
crazy, Reef. So you know this. My mom had a heart attack and a stroke 2.5 years ago. She passed away a couple weeks ago.
Mm,
And when she had her stroke, she went from living alone, running her own household, doing her own investments, all that stuff, to 100% assistance,
mm.
like in 24 hours. So, because the stroke was catastrophic, right? It was huge. It was what they call a watershed stroke. So it was like buckshot. It hit the brain and went boom, right? And, at the time they were like, she's not going to make it. I'm like, you've never met her. She's the most stubborn woman on the planet. And so she lived for another 2.5 years. What's really interesting to me is she remembered people she knew from a long time ago. So like my husband, me, my brother, the people she was living with, it was a brand new day. If she took a nap, no idea. You'd be like, that's Lisa. She'd just fall asleep for a second, wake back up. Who's that? That's Lisa. But what was crazy is she never really talked about my father. And they were married like 56, almost 57 years. She talked
Wow.
about her parents and
Wow.
living on the farm and like getting chicks in the mail because her mom would order chicks and have and like she raised hens and like all the stuff, but stuff from this childhood from 1934 to about 1940. That's the stuff she would talk about because it was her amygdala. It's this
So,
hardwiring of your early attachment stuff that happens in childhood. Yeah,
wow.
because I called like my therapist and I was like, okay, I need to understand this. How is it my mom doesn't like? I'll bring up my father. She's like, like nothing. And I was like, and her parents were not great, right? They weren't great parents. And she's like, no, you don't understand because those memories are stored in the just very, very deep seated like safety part of the brain, the amygdala. Your later memories, no matter how long you have them, are not tied to your survival in the same way. And I'm like,
Wow.
oh, yeah. So when we wonder why we act a certain way, it's because we decided that when we were 4, because whatever we picked up from our environment and the people around us and the attachments is like
Watch
that's driving your train. I'm like, oh,
That's the more we learn about I'm big on wanting to be a great father one day and have a
mhm.
great family. Like that's why I do everything I do, blood test work, working out, fitness, build a company, the whole bit, be able to homeschool my kids in the future, all that great stuff. And
Yeah,
it fascinates me, the difference between being a good parent, not a loving parent, not a nurturing parent, whatever, a good parent, like understanding what behavioral patterns are, what your inputs, outputs are, how you could be impacting, how important certain scenarios are, right? Having these conversations, you know, I believe in reframes, like reframing your mind and reframing the way you look at the world. That's what we're calling it, reframes. Like,
yeah.
how do you reframe your perspective, and in bad situations, how do you turn them into a positive, right? Or how do you reframe a circumstance so that you're not allowing the circumstances to define you, but you're defining the circumstance, which my mom taught me. For me, it's a lot of how will I be mission, vision oriented? How do I want to be in the future? Father, good father. What does that look like? Study that now so that I can get there with
Yeah.
the most success.
Yeah.
Um, what's a reframe that you have for your life? Like what's a way that you like some of the things that you do in your life where you would say they make you an exceptional human because you don't accept reality the way it is. I've heard the no thing, you don't accept no. But
Yeah, definitely.
what
I joke all the time about it's not a joke because it's overarching message in my life. I have a pretty strong justice trigger. So
mm,
when I see what is I perceive as something unjust, right?
okay.
Somebody that's taking advantage of older people or children or all the terrible things that you can imagine with that. It's bullying doesn't really matter. Like and I do get triggered by it, but I would say in a good way, because at that point I'm going to double down. Right.
Mm,
So I can give you an example. So my mom was in this assisted living center, this very small home. The man who opened it he's no longer able to be licensed in the state of Texas because my justice trigger got what it deserved. But he had bought a bunch of these houses and was grifting money off the top and went into foreclosure. And he was going to go through bankruptcy and basically get the debt wiped out. He'd already been through 3 bankruptcies. Reef, you and I both know how hard it is to get money. Somebody
wow.
gave him $50 million after having 3 separate bankruptcies because he was a ex-NHL player. And
No.
so he had 67 older individuals in assisted living, most of them memory care and other things. And he was taking money off the top, and they go into foreclosure. And, the banks that owned the house reached out to another company and said, hey, he's not going to get out of this. We need somebody to come in and manage these. We don't want to kick all these people out of these homes. Right. And we didn't know he hadn't been paying the employees. So for 3 months, the employees were coming to work every day, having not been paid. Now, let me also mind you, these are the employees that a lot of people in the United States right now don't think need to be here. I didn't even know there was a problem. I was there every day. And I didn't know because no one ever told me. So all this happens. And then Department of Health and Human Services shows up and says, we have 3 days to move everybody out of that house. And when they called me, I was like, who's there? Right? I need to know who the boss is there. And they, say it. And I said, are you still there? Because I'm going to come over. And I was like, at this moment, we're not moving. And they're like, well, the state said. I'm like, well, you just met me. So all I did was start making phone calls. So within an hour, we were on TV. We had a news article the next morning, because to me, DHS, their job is to protect people. They had brought in another company to manage. They had already taken over managing the house. And the reason why DHS got involved and wanted to kick everybody out is because they couldn't figure out how to transfer the license to the new company. So instead of getting around a table and going, let's do a temporary license, give the new company, they just said, move everybody now. And all the power of attorneys, all the family members were picketing out front, and they thought we would move. And I was like, no. So I went down to that house. I talked to the banker. I did a bunch of stuff. We allowed most of the people to move out. And when it dropped to 3 people, it was no longer under the licensure for the state of Texas. So I took over managing it. I hired the employees, and I walked in and kicked out DHS because I had lit everybody up. I called the attorney general. I even tried to get a hold of RFK. I was like, I've been in a documentary with him. Let's go.
Wow.
Yeah. But everybody's like, why'd you do it? I was like, I had a place for my mom that day. And I was like, but Department of Homeland, HHS, their job is to protect people who are vulnerable, and they're failing to do their job here. Yeah. And I was like, and so I just didn't let go, so I took it over. I was like, I'm managing this home right now until somebody else buys it. And then I made sure the guy that owned that place can't get licensed in the state of Texas for 5 years. And he's probably going to be wearing orange with a federal prison because he was also breaking Stark law and anti-kickback. But I'm like, and I even talked to his lawyer. His lawyer was kind of smarmy with me, and he was just like, whatever. And he said, well, you can go ahead and take us on. And I said, honey, you met your match. I said, I'm an angry 55-year-old woman with money, agency, and time. And he just sat there. I was like, I'm going to go all the way to the mat just because I want to.
Wow.
And I was like, I will. But I'm just wired that way. So here's the funny thing, long story endless. I was talking to my girlfriends about it, and some of them I've known since childhood, kind of little stand by me group of friends. Sure. And it was funny because all of it, like 3 of them were like, do you remember how we met? One of them was getting picked on the school grounds. And I walked up, I'm short. Reef, you've never seen me. I'm like barely 5'3". I walked up and talked trash and pushed the bully off. Another one was getting picked on somewhere else. Like I became friends with them because other people were doing that. Like I've had that all my life, and I had no idea. I was like, oh yeah, I guess that is true, And so if I am like, this is not just, I can't let it go. Like I have to get involved.
Wow. People, you're so important to our world. Wow, I love that. Wow. So reframe, I guess there is, when you're able to and capable to, you should stand up for the rights and oppression of others when they don't have a voice for themselves. Yeah,
because the truth is, if you stay quiet, you're complicit. You're equally.
You're part of the
my
problem.
husband says it all the time. He's like, if 11 people are sitting at the table with a KKK hat and you're the 12th that sits down and you're not wearing one, you're wearing a hat from the KKK.
Totally.
By association. And so like, especially today, I look at everything going on and I'm like, just no. Just no.
Wow.
And, without getting political, but, the reality is if you can stand up, you must stand up.
I think that's so beautiful. I think that, that is the way it should be. And, well articulated. I think that's such a beautiful way to look at the world. I think that's such a powerful way to look at the world. And we should have dialogue and discourse, across borders, across tables, across, you name it, Yeah.
I mean, I may not agree with a lot of the rhetoric coming out today. And I mean, I don't, but I'm always curious because I have a couple friends that absolutely are not politically aligned with me. And I'm always like, how did you, how are you coming to that conclusion, or how did you get here? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
Because it's so different from how I see it. right? And so I think it's important, but we've lost a lot of that ability to have just discourse, right?
I
Like,
agree.
we don't have to agree. Could we just talk about it and see if we can? Because I think in the talking about it, you can find common ground. But if you're not willing to ever talk about it, you'll never find common ground.
Yeah, I also find that the more I talk to people that are on all political sides and venues and ways of thinking, when they're able to have a conversation, when able to, like there is
Yeah.
an interesting thing that happens where people become triggered and incited on, either side of anything, which is fascinating. I tend to ask, what are you watching? What are you seeing? What's your content? Can you send me a reel? Like what? And yeah, I've had several occasions where people, because I have people sending me reels all the time on Instagram, and they'll share with me that they're seeing reels that are exactly like what I'm seeing, but two completely different
Different
narratives,
stories.
or people speaking over it or talking over points, or
And we're being manipulated.
you feel it. You feel
We
like
are 100%. Like, yes.
you can sense that there's like, an incitement on, both sides, and there's a feeling of total veracity of truth where you stand because of what you've seen. And you're
Right.
like, yeah, of course this makes sense. Look at the facts and the data. How do you not see it this
Yeah.
way?
How do you not see
And
it? Yeah.
and I
And
think
because we're all a victim of the algorithm, right? Because Meta, X,
all of
Instagram, it doesn't matter. All of them want you to be on the platform looking at their ads. And
it.
they know, like they even have sort of a methodology. So when you, and I'll probably get this a little bit out of order, but like, let's say you log on. So they're going to show you something that somewhat like incites your trigger, whatever your trigger is.
Mhm.
And then they're going to have something else that sort of wraps around it. Then they're going to have some like interest story, like the animal that shows the human, hey, my partner got hurt over on, like the deer that gets hurt and brings a human to help the other deer.
Oh, I love that.
I
Yeah.
love those stories, but they have an algorithm, right? It's incite your anger, whatever your anger is, because you're being played, and then they'll
Yeah.
have another one. Then they'll have that one. Then right behind it is an ad they know you'd look at, because they're jerking you through the emotional chain, right?
I'm thinking of a documentary. What's the name of that documentary that they did on the social experiment?
Yeah, the social experiment. Yeah, I mean, we're being played every time. Like even from a news standpoint, I started reading. Have you heard of ground news? So ground news
Mm-mm.
consolidates a bunch of news, and they'll tell you what news channel they're picking it up from, and then they score it. Is it in the middle? Is it red? Is it blue? And sort of help. And they're like, this is an area where the blue people are probably not getting all the information. This is an area where the red, and it's just the data, right? It's the data, but then it will say, because these news outlets are pushing this particular agenda, it's leaning a little more this way or that way. It does a good job of trying to, because I was like, we need a Walter Cronkite. I'm going to age myself. And we need somebody that just reports the news. But even that today is 100% biased. So it's like, okay, how do I get that without being played? Yeah, the social experience is so good.
Social experiment. And we'll go here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you
Wow.
see how it's kind of scored. And so I look at that because number one, it'll consolidate a bunch of the different news channels, and then it'll say kind of here's where they're from. And then they'll kind of give you this gradient, because it'll come up sometimes and like, okay, nobody on the let's say the Republican side is seeing this, or nobody on the Democratic side is seeing this, or anybody in the middle. So it's a good way to go, okay, am I not being jerked around? Because the reality is social media, TV, media in any type is here to sell.
It's become that.
Yeah, they're here to sell. They're not here to help you. They're here to make money. And if they can keep you on there, and especially if they can get you riled up about something, that's what they're going to do,
Yeah.
And I get pulled in, and it makes me mad at myself that I get pulled in.
Me too. The news was meant before to give you news, and now it feels like the news, you have to go verify and validate the news. The news used to inform you. Now you have to inform yourself to the news and make sure you don't get. I can't tell you how many times I'm running through things through Gemini, and seeing like what is the truth, what's the full story, what's an objective point of view, and let you make the decision rather than.
Some of your more obscure news organizations are really good. The Christian Science Monitor has always been really good at just reporting the news. Al
What are they called?
Jazeera. Christian Science Monitor. So it's a journalism organization that's been around for forever that report on national and international news, but they're very good at just kind of here it is, right? They've always been. Al Jazeera, oddly enough, has some pretty interesting sort of just straightforward, here's what's happening. I haven't read as much from Al Jazeera lately, but they tend to just report the news. It's not, it's not leaning really heavy one way or the other.
I love that. The way news should be, like informative. We've lost that. And again, to social media, they've learned that emotions sell. So how do we get people as emotionally triggered as possible to go? Thank you for sharing. By the way, thank you for sharing this with me.
Yeah.
This is a I love because now I feel like I could be a more informed human. Like I like knowing the objective truth. I want to be able to make decision. I don't, like the idea of manipulation or that,
Yeah.
you are being manipulated from the tablecloth without you even knowing it, and then you wake up one day and you're seeing people get trained off somewhere, right? In the
Yeah.
batches, they're justifying, rationalizing a concentration camp, and you're like, how did we get here? Like
Yeah.
that, that reality has happened before already. Like,
Yeah. I mean, in Germany, the vast majority of people were not behind Hitler. They were just quietly going along, thinking it would never get that bad. Right?
wow.
We have to remember that the majority were not hardcore Nazis. They were just complicit by silence.
And that's dangerous. That I think of that constantly. I think about the idea of like women getting raped on trains and stuff, and people not reacting. Like, how do you
Mhm.
not? How do you become? Maybe you're similar because you probably have similar like we hate people being judged unfairly or unjustly.
Yeah.
I hop to the opportunity of seeing something. I'm first to act. I try to get the phone, call 911, whatever. Hey, what's going on here? Ask the question, make it awkward. Going
Mhm.
to the Philippines, there was a guy that was holding a boy and a girl by the arms the entire flight, and they had their head down the entire way. And I was like, that's odd. I kept kind of looking and
Yeah, it would make me crazy. I would
the hair,
just be beside myself.
the girl's hair was dyed, and I heard that and they dye kids' hairs, they usually transport them, etc. So we get to the Philippines, and I'm like, hey, like what's going on here, kind of deal. Um, and I stopped them in the airport and get police over, and the little girl, she was like, no, this is my dad, and the little boy went off to the side, like it still didn't seem right, very fishy. And the person they put up on the phone she was Filipina and the kids weren't. And they were like, these are my kids. And I was like, something's so off here. But the police were like, leave it be. So I grabbed my bags and left. But I still remember thinking to myself, like, I think I just witnessed something that was irregular and I didn't know how to stop it. And I hated that feeling,
Yeah.
it doesn't sit well with me. It doesn't sit well with me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of in an odd sort of way, hyper vigilant. Like I'm just,
Too.
I'll pay attention when other people don't. We used to live down the street from an elementary school, and we've moved since, but, and at the time I was a runner, and they had like 4 baseball diamonds, and then they had a playground over here. So families would come and their little boys would be playing baseball, and the little kids would be way over here on the playground, and I remember running one time and I run by a car and some dude's just sitting in the car. So I'm like, bang on the window. I'm like, you need to pick it up and get out of here, because I was like, whatever you're doing, you shouldn't be here.
Weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm just like, those kind of things. I'm like, I didn't go through any of those things, but I'm just super aware of what doesn't feel and look right. And I don't always, I try and act on it, but I think like in the same thing, what do you do in those cases, right? You're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. Like the hair standing up on the back of my neck, but I don't have the resources in which to do something about it because I don't have enough data. And it's also not my,
Yeah.
what do I do here?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in total agreement there. But I get that same feeling, and I feel I think a social obligation for all of us to take care of each other on this beautiful planet. I think that's what makes the planet so much more beautiful. That the person ahead of us, in front of us, is not the battle, but the person within ourselves that we're trying to beat. And then within that, then also seeing how can we serve the people that are next to us. And if we all had that mentality, then we can, you would be thinking that the people around you are thinking in your best interest rather than out to get you.
Yeah.
I'm hyper vigilant. Like I almost to an obsessive state. Like when I go to a restaurant, I sit in the corner or I sit with my face to the door so I can see people or entrance points, I check all the doors before I go to bed. Good night, check my gun, make sure it's loaded, the whole thing, like ready to go. Like I am fully aware that the world can be a very interesting place. And if I can save as many people as possible from that reality, I'll do that. Like I will spend all my resources trying to make the next generation better, even if it's just by 0.5% or 1/4%. Yeah.
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 It's funny you say that because like I live in Texas. So I've lived in Texas this last time, like 29 years. And I've never owned a gun, which is funny because, in Texas, you pretty much expect people to like,
Texan, you have to. Yeah.
store, right? And I did go shoot a gun for the first time, like in May. I was like, I need to know how to hit something with a 9mm. I'm actually quite good at it, at like 15 feet out.
Yeah.
But it was funny because everybody's always like, because my husband would work. My husband was a firefighter and he recently retired, but he worked 24 hours every 3 days. And people are always like, aren't you worried? I'm like, I'm a woman. I have so much pent up rage. I have a baseball bat. Through the door, it's personal. And I just joke about it because I was like, nobody's going to take me on. Nobody's going to take me on.
Yeah.
And I don't I don't think I'm going to live in those kind of environments, but it was really funny because everybody's like, couldn't believe that I never had a gun. I didn't shoot guns. I was like, no, I don't dig that. Right. I don't like how it feels to even shoot a gun. That there's
it's an odd feeling.
I don't really like it.
It's odd for me too. But I think, my recommendation, not saying anything, get a gun.
Mm-hmm. My husband has one,
good,
but I was like,
okay.
I don't know how to do it. I was like, I want to be able to handle one. So if I needed to,
yes.
Right.
Everyone should take a course, like a gun handling course, just to understand how.
Yeah. I was like, how do you load a clip? How do I'm ambidextrous. So I actually shoot from either hand. So that was kind of interesting.
Whoa.
Yeah. And so, cause I bat from either side. I play pool from either side. So you can imagine I'm sitting in a, a gun range and I'm holding the gun. I'm like, trying to figure out which side feels better. And the people are like, what is she doing? And I was like, I am ambidextrous. I use both sides. I got to figure out, I am left-handed. I decided left-handed, but I can use my right if I needed to. That's funny. Wild. I'm sure they were like, stay away from her.
No, yeah, they're probably like, what the heck is she doing? And you're just like, well, I can write with both hands. I think I can shoot with both hands, that's wild. Yeah, that speaks to who you are, just willing to try new things and put yourself out there and experience new things. Yeah, I think it really goes to note the 3 different career paths you've had in life and just the evolution of your last 20 years in the health space and how, even like 2 years ago, I think, or 2022, I think you started a menopause group, I think, right? Or
we started Minerva. So Minerva is a telemedicine and technology firm. So it's a femtech company. And so we provide hormone replacement therapy, bioidentical hormones in all 50 states. And we're in the middle we raised capital last year. And so we're in the middle of building women's digital health intelligence platform, for lack of a better word. So it's a way for a woman to download and start learning about her own symptoms, attaches to all of her wearables. So if you're like me and I've got this and all this. Yeah. So you got all these devices, but the thing is you have to go to each one of those devices and look at them separately. Totally. Right. So we're bringing them in along with your subjective data, or your CGM or whatever, laboratory data, DNA, and starting to help you pull it together for your own sort of understanding of your health. And then obviously it's available to our clinicians. So you have basically the ability for technology to be proactive, predictive, and preventative. Right? Because we can inspect all that data. So for each woman, we have all this longitudinal data for her. But when we look at it in aggregate, then we now have my goal is the largest longitudinal database of women's health data in the world that's void of pharma and not part of NIH either. So it's independent, and we can act as a flywheel to create products and services for women and hopefully be the technology women's health runs on. That's what I want to build. And we're in the middle of building it. So, we're still raising capital. I took a little bit of a break, but we're still raising capital. So, yeah.
The way medicine should be. Wow. I mean, that is the way medicine should be. I can see you did a podcast there, and Minerva was what you launched. But it's just the evolution of what you've done with health through so many years. And now final crescendo, it feels like, right? How much more can you help people besides making a platform like that, besides walking side by side and holding their hand through something?
Yeah. I mean, that's like, so I've had my clinic for 20 years. So a lot of our protocols and data and all of that is from just sheer just we've been doing it for a long time. And the other
Yeah.
thing is I went back for a PhD, and a lot of it at like 49. So I finished that. And part of what I was trying to do was figure out how to build complex research models. Because one of the arguments in science, number one, less than 1% of all research dollars go to women in menopause, despite the fact that 100% of women go through it, and it's a third of our life. And number two, most of the research is done with like this one-to-one thing. We're going to try this one thing, this drug, and we're going to look at this one outcome and ignore everything else around it. And so there's always an argument, particularly for functional medicine or more integrated models, that there's no evidence. And I'm like, there's evidence there, but when you don't look for it because you won't fund studies that actually allow to capture multiple data points and build, I look at it, it's like a matrix. It's like a bunch of codes. Yeah, it's this huge model. And I was like, the data's there. You're just too stupid because you're using old scientific models to try and capture it. So I was like, instead of fighting, I'm just going to build it.
I mean, I guess that's such a fascinating way to look at that, because if you think about isolating a variable and trying to identify for that variable, it does work in certain situations, but in a situation where you're talking about chemistry or human biology, you do have to take so many different markers into account: age, consideration, race, background, health, habits, what they're eating, what they have been eating, haven't been
Social
eating.
and economical determinants. Yeah. All those things.
Yeah.
And, and you've got, and you've got all these other confounding variables that you try and control for, right? In traditional research. But I'm like, you want to control for them, but what if you can capture that data in another way? Because you might actually see patterns just in the data itself. Like, even if you're not doing that, if you've got enough data and you've got really well-built AI agents looking through that data, they will identify stuff that you can't identify as a human. And we just don't have that. And it's very siloed. And right now, because it's all being paid for by big pharma, big medical device or the insurance companies, there's too much bias there. And, we're doing it purely from a care model, for the patient, for the woman. They don't have to be a patient to use the technology. But the other side of it is we're also using it for the independence of the science itself.
You seem like a very core principles type of person. Like, try to find the problem at the core root and solve for that, which I've oftentimes become frustrated and not want to work for certain projects or things that I'm doing because I feel like it's just busy, where it's not getting the end result to the bigger picture or the greater good of humanity. So I feel like, what are we doing? Like cutting logs for what? That kind of sensation. Like, why are we counting beans? The bigger question. You seem like a very fundamental core root person. Like, what is the most centralized issue, and then build out from that. Like that's a huge project you're taking on. Holy cannoli.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't start there, like you were talking about, like, cutting logs. I think you have to cut a lot of logs. You have to start and stop. You have to fail. I've literally had 3 different careers. I didn't go to med school because I thought 12 years and all that time that I was going to have to pay for myself to go through school, because I had to pay my way through every single hour I've ever done. So I went into sales and marketing. I have gone to school and have spent more money, right? Like, because I've had 3 distinct careers. So sales and marketing, IT, health and nutrition and human biochemistry, and then PhD, right? So I was like, yeah. And so, but it's the iterative process of just human learning, evolving. And learning it's okay to sometimes have to cut wood, because you don't always know why you're cutting the wood, but in the end, when you get them all cut up and you put them in the rack, that taught you something that now you learn from. And it's the same thing with failure, right? People always don't want to fail, but usually that's the only time you learn something is when you fail, or at least you flop, right? And and I've had a lot of those over my lifetime.
I think that it takes a special person to see spatial thinking and what's culminated you to be who you are today. I mean, marketing and sales, right, to engineering, right, and development. Like, that's a whole 2 different sides of the brain in some ways not, because it's very numbers oriented. And then going to health, which is a very data driven but very sparse data. Like, that's a big issue they're having now with AI, is like the data is so difficult to sift through because there's so many studies all written in graphs so differently. So it's not not like learning coding, right? Where you have C++, right? JavaScript, right? Ruby on Rails, whatever, Python. Like there's a core you can kind of all build from the same 6 or 8 or 10 languages, and everything's built off of that. Whereas
Right.
science and medical, so many different nodes or base camps and pillars of different ways that data is articulated. And then from
Yeah.
there, it sprouts out even more. Colleges have different papers. Like everyone, the data is just so out there, right? Like
Yeah.
collecting all that. So you have to be a very special person to who you are. I think you have to be a very special person to see data like that and then spatially put it all together and take past experiences to put it all together. I don't think everyone is like that. I know for a fact not everyone's like that. Like that takes
Yeah, okay.
very,
Because I
you
think
know,
everybody can be, because I'm like, of course you can
me
be.
too. Me
There's
too.
nothing unique about me at all.
Me
I'm just
too.
curious. I'd say the two things that I am at my absolute uh,
Core.
rock bottom kind of core of me is I'm curious all the time. Doesn't matter what the subject matter is. I'm like, what is that? I got to understand that. I got to go dig. Yeah. And I would say the other part is I'm okay with just change. I'm just like, okay, I kind of look forward. I like novelty, but I look at it and I'm like, change is never bad, right? In the long run, it might be shitty in the short run, but in the long run, it is never bad. And it takes just going ahead and doing it and recognizing that, yes, it might be uncomfortable. And that was cultivated over time. But I think those two things have allowed me to play in those different arenas where most people wouldn't have. They would have stayed, in a particular safe experience, right? Even if they hated it. I do not do discomfort. If I no longer am interested, I'm no longer interested. I got to go. I'm done. I will find something else. I'm like, I'm done, not interested. I've gotten what I need out of this. I got to go.
Yeah, very mathematical stating. I mean, until further data, suspend all judgment is what comes to mind there,
Yeah.
like, yeah. And then the curiosity, I have a list of core values, and one of you helped me, you actually added a portion to it, which is there are problem passers and then there are problem uh, solvers, right? Which I have on there. So that's also part of that. And then one of them is curiosity. I think curiosity is a major attribute of high level thinkers, problem solvers, the question askers, the challengers. Is there a different way or a better way? And I say this because I don't think I often ran into this idea of I'm not special.
Mhm.
Anybody could, duh, this is what you should do. But then the more you start to work with people and talk to people, you realize, oh, this logic tree might be a little unique. The way I problem solve, the way that I have a hierarchy of logic, right? That I come to a resolution or express is different to most people. And I've become very acute to finding that in other people because those are the people I like to gravitate towards.
Yeah.
I have 12 principles for
Yeah.
choosing friends. So I have a list.
I know.
That's,
Yes.
I'll tell you where this comes from. This came from X that once said, Reef, you're an elitist. All you care about is people with money. And I was like, no, that's not true. And she's like, yeah, and you only care about people that are doing great things. I was like, that's kind of true. Yeah. And I was like, how do I choose my friends? So I made this list up just totally not to spite her, but to say, I sense I have a way of a reframing of mine is when someone tells you something, there may be some truth to that. So dig a little deep
Always.
until you have a good why. Your own curiosity of self. Like, what's my deep why? That's actually a great point.
Mhm.
And where someone might be digging at you and telling you something that they're trying to hurt you, you can turn it into
Yeah.
oh, that's a good reflective point. Let's look at that. I wonder what that is. Where does that come from? So I made this list. Number one, and you're all these on a T. Emotionally intelligent, duh, you. Two, growth oriented or minded, duh, you. Three, talk about future projects, not people. I've never heard you say something poor about a person, ever, never. Even some of the outcomes we've had with a similar person, we're both kind of like, be careful, yeah, be careful, right? Rather than like damning somebody.
Yep.
Four, cognitive. You're very cognitive, which I think is so powerful. Self-aware. Self-awareness is it kind of goes in line with cognitive, but
Yeah.
that ability to be aware of yourself that you are experiencing, and that just is, it's not like an aloof thing. Some people I feel like are just walking with their eyes wide shut. Vulnerable, which you are, very powerful. A clear communicator, amazing. Eight, great question asker, which you are awesome at, which is your curiosity side, obviously. Yeah. Nine, does this person align with my goals in life? 10, can we help each other along our journeys? 11, continuously fine-tuning self. 12,
Hmm.
intentional. And you are such an intentional person, which totally makes sense. 13, be around people who think limitlessly.
Yeah.
Those people are phenomenal. That everything is possible. And the last one, which is it has a little asterisk by it. It's actually like a caveat to all of it, I'd say a foundational layer is people that are okay with being misunderstood. Like you're okay
Hmm.
to be misunderstood. And then
Yeah.
that's what made me think about that because you essentially kind of said that in a nutshell, right? Like
Yeah.
and I love that part of, I am gonna do this and I think it's good. And because I think it's good and I have all this data to back it up, I'm gonna go with it. And even if I'm misunderstood by other people, I'm gonna tackle this challenge. I love that. Yeah. Love that about you.
Yeah. I think there's no greater personal development experience than becoming like an entrepreneur because it requires you, in order to improve and achieve, it requires you to become what you want to be before you even get there. Right.
Agreed.
And so I'm constantly, challenging myself to do that because, there's, I like one of the things I'm always like, if I'm watching somebody, like, I'm watching somebody on Instagram or on YouTube and I get a little green with envy and I'm like, check yourself because the only reason why you're green with envy is she's doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I'm like,
Oh,
but I do it right because I'm like every time I have a little green envy show up, I'm like, well, let's see, wonder why that is. Oh, that's because you probably, in order to do what you want to do, you should be also doing that, and you're not. Why are you not? Right? The curiosity is why are you not? What is it about it? Right? That's just an example, but everything's like that. Like if I have this, why not me? Or why am I here and this person's there? Or that kind of stuff. It's the reality is they're doing what you're not doing.
oof. Major
Yeah.
ownership, highest level. Holy
Yeah, I'm
cannoli.
like, look, girl, they're doing something you're not doing, clearly. So I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, own it or don't own it. But once you identify it, then you can make the choice. Do I want to do it or not? Right. But if you pretend that that's not it, then you can stay in this quandary of, I don't understand why. Like, yes, you do. Yes, you
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Yes, you do. And so whenever I get a little twitchy on myself, it's like, yeah, you do.
Yeah, you're so right. I've been watching content recently, and I recognize that CEOs should be focused on hiring potential, allocating resources,
Yeah.
and then training that potential and putting them into a position. So
Yeah.
seeing and spending 20 to 30 hours a week on content, which is wild to me, but it's such an important part of it. So I
Yeah.
took kind of a sidestep and said, okay, I need to grow in this area. Why am I not that? And really reflect. And I'm going to double click on what you said about entrepreneurship because holy cannoli, add my email. I subscribe 100% right behind you and agreed. The
Hmm.
deeper entrepreneurship is an interesting game because where most people are just kind of living by the reality that they're in, we have to
Hmm.
build our reality. And
Yeah.
you can only create that next ladder if you seek to go deeper into yourself. And your company is a reflection of how deep you're willing to go into yourself and your own vulnerability and how ugly your inner mess is. Or you become so jaded at creating a coping mechanism that you're a
Yeah.
really one-sided individual or dimensional individual and you can only do one thing really well, like one trick pony, just make a lot of money doing it. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
find that the more you're willing to go into self, the more successful you'll be, or the more fruitful the relationships or the business around you is. And that's a
Yeah.
game that no one else faces. Look at your background. Look at all the books. This is a huge for me. This is accomplished. Look at that beauty you
Yeah.
have behind you. Like you
Yeah.
have to literally take other people's perspectives and layer yours on top of it.
Yeah, those
At
are
a,
just my most recent business books. Like I have a whole wall in my office of other, like I have to rotate because I run out of space. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to bequeath these books to other people.
favorite business book. I'm interested in understanding your favorite business book.
Oh, I would say it's so I'm in a mode right now because a lot of it is because I am scaling, the telemedicine and tech company. And right now we're like heads down, so like, I remember talking to the president I brought in, my co-founder, and she's like, so when we go to do this, who do we have? And I'm like, we're sitting at a table and I looked at her and I was like, are you looking at me? I go, that's us. And we're a startup, right? We're trying to be judicious with the money. I was like, it's one of us. It's a Saturday. Ken's on, Ken's off. We're not calling Ken on a Saturday to do this. So
Right.
what is it you want? Because she'd come from a much larger organization.
Sure.
So now I'm in this kind of mode of like we just heads down getting some stuff done, but recognizing that this year my job is content. My job is sway public opinion, get message out there and do that. But it's like, okay, I got to get finished with this heads down kind of thing. But my favorite business book, so Scaling by Dr. Ben Hardy, if you have not read that.
Great.
I love Ben Hardy. His Future Self book was amazing. 10x is easier than 2x. Great book.
That's it.
I just recently listened to Fix This Now by Mike Michalowicz, and then also Buy Back Your Time, because that's always one of those things, because I'm always like, how can I become more efficient so I'm not working more but producing more, right? And a lot of times producing more, like you said, is true delegation with responsibility, and then putting the systems in place so you can do those things. And so I'm constantly sort of looking at those things, because that's where I need to spend most of my time, is to withdraw myself from the day to day so I can be strategic and communicative about what the company's goal and purpose is. That's really my role. And I spent a lot of time hands on it because we were raising capital. We didn't have enough money to put people in place. So it was like, when something needed to happen, it was like, make it happen,
Wow.
Like, I was like, okay,
Great books. All great. And Buy Back Your Time. I love Dan Martell. Awesome. A lot of what I do is very similar to that. Help people do time audit, et cetera, all that stuff. So I have a house manager, right? I have 3 EAs. Like, it's literally, how many areas can I buy back my time and scale that? Now it's buying back more expensive brain power to buy back different parts of time of a company, which is kind of fascinating. A whole new area of buying back time, which is cool. Oh, I love that. Well, I want to be mindful of our time. We're just hitting the hour. And what is one message? I can talk to you for hours, which is, I hope we do another.
We have talked for hours.
Correct.
We rap for forever. It's totally fine, but
correct. What's one message that you want people to know about you, or what's going on right now, or that really resonates with you, that you want to put out into the world? Is it about the capital raising your company? What your a mission, vision statement? What is it that you really want to share? I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd love that people as a gift.
I have so many different things, but I would say, the big one is, women, every person on the planet holds their life to the woman that bore them, right? And, we've largely been left ignored by medicine. We weren't even in studies until after 1993. I was out of college, right? Women were excluded from studies because they knew that our hormones would kind of screw up the variables. So instead of making sure they controlled for that and testing stuff on women, they just said, we're just going to pretend that they're men. And so, it's those kind of injustices, because injustice comes from blatant ignorance a lot more so than blatant hatred or anger, right? And so I look at my hill I'm dying on, which is for women's health, because if we can make women healthier, we make the planet healthier. That we have the opportunity to basically take 100 years of, misappropriations and ignorance of women's health and compress it in a very short period of time. And that's really what Minerva's here to do, is to really kind of level that playing field and allow for women's health to get the due diligence that it needs, because we suffer more chronic disease than men. We live longer with more chronic disease than men. And we suffer from diseases that attack us earlier, like autoimmune. Those are young people's diseases. They don't show up when they're 70. They show up when they're 20. And that's the stuff that keeps me going. That's the stuff that I'm like, we can't just sit around and point fingers and expect government agencies and universities to do something about it. They're driven by money, not purpose. And so that's the purpose. And so if people are along for that ride, they can reach out to me. And if this is something that resonates, whether it's, people with capital, or you want to get involved, or, whatever those things are, that's what I'm doing. My husband retired, and I was like, oh, I got a whole nother company I just started. I'm not done yet. So I probably will never be done yet. That's not how I'm wired, but, yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of your success story and just a bystander and a playing role in it. I like that I'll be able to have a little signature on history in a small portion, but a small portion nonetheless, It's cool.
Yeah. Reef, you and your team have definitely helped us scale, and those things are always valuable. Yes.
I'll do, this is more of I want to reframe it just about mental capacity of people. I am going to do, we've started a software. We launched agentic software doing international payroll, healthcare and benefits. And we have the We Assist side. We are going to do another expose or podcast just surrounding offshoring and people hiring and hiring talent and business and more of that. This is more of getting to know amazing people,
Yeah.
that's more than anything what I want to do here is I get to know amazing people, how their brain works, the behaviors that we should share to the next generation to be like, hey, what is it how's that person wired? Like, what are they thinking through? And I think that's so important. And you're perfect. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even get to half the talking points. Are you kidding me? You're just such like a wealth of knowledge and information and just one sliver of a pot. Like one droplet of your blood is a whole podcast in comparison to another person you could pour a bucket and you couldn't get it 5 minutes out of them. So you're awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Betty. Yeah, just like always, you're the first one. So I'm so grateful for you. So
Yeah.
grateful for you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. Okay, have a wonderful night. Enjoy with your
Yeah,
husband.
you too.
Uh,
Bye, Eric and Kate.
can't wait to talk to you next.
All right. Yes, absolutely.